today's the day you will learn how to get that cool guitar sound from the intro of What's My Age Again. Let's do this. All right, and we're not just gonna do the clean guitars, we're gonna do all of the dirty guitars as well. So stick around. Subscribe to my channel, by the way, because I'm doing this series on how to produce the song from scratch in Ableton Live using only Ableton Live plugins. So I've done a video about drums already and a video about bass already. So make sure you go watch those. And today, it's all about the guitars. The instrument that I actually play. Kinda. But yeah, we're gonna talk about the intro, we're gonna talk about the dirty guitars, we're gonna talk about the mellow guitars in the middle part, we're gonna talk about all of these guitars. So yeah, let's do this. So the clean guitars, they're very important in the song, right? Because in the end, this song is still a song about love, and it's still a mellow song, and it's quite melancholic, isn't it? So the clean guitars are very important because they give that melancholy sound to the song. And they start in the intro by themselves. So I really needed to nail that sound to make sure the song had kind of the same vibe as the original song, right? Let's see how I did this. So here are my clean guitars. I recorded 3 guitar tracks to get that one guitar sound, right? One guitar to be panned to the left, another guitar to be panned to the right. And when I listened to the track, like I listened to it so many times, I had the impression, I don't know if I'm right, I can be totally wrong, but I had the impression that the root notes of the riff were coming a little bit more from the middle than they were from the sides. The middle root notes were a little bit more to the middle than the high notes of the riff, which was weird. I was like, how can I make that happen? So you see here, I have a third track in the middle playing just the root notes. That was very important to give me the same vibe that the song gave me, that was like root notes and the other notes. Root notes, the other notes. So it was like, get it? I'm doing a lot of mouth sounds in this tutorial. I'm starting to get embarrassed. Anyways, because I want you to be able to do this in your home as well, I recorded my guitars directly to my interface. No amps, no pedals, no nothing. And I'm gonna show you how that sounds right now. So here's my clean guitar. Again, it's not horrible, but it's lame, right? It's not cool. It misses so much of the original sound. So let me turn everything on again. I don't have to turn on the tuner. That's just a good habit, right? To have the tuner plug in there when you're playing guitars. Anyways, I use the Fender Strat, which luckily for me is the same that Tom uses as well. I'm not sure if Tom actually recorded with the Strat in the song. I have no clue. I couldn't really find any mentions about it because he usually recorded with a Gibson as well quite a lot. So I'm not sure. This might not be a Fender in the original track, but I recorded with a Fender Strat. So here we go. The first step was to get a basic guitar sound. So to do that, I use the amp plugin, right? And again, just like I did on bass, I don't know why, I'm gravitating towards the blue amp every time in this song, but it just had the spunk that I needed. The high end to be really there, just had the right attack for my picking, you know, it was just right. The blues amp was really good. I could really raise the gain as well without crunching it too much, which was nice because those guitars, they have a little bit of a crunch, a little bit of a dirt there in the background, but they're still clean guitars, right? But I didn't mess around with the amp too much because once I put on the blues amp preset, it sounded quite nice. So this is how it sounds before and after. You see how it just gets that spunky sound, that shimmery Fender amp sound. I thought it was great. I thought it sounded really close to the song already. So the next step was my cabinet. And you guys know that I don't use the cabinet plugin here in Ableton Live, right? I have mentioned that in the video about bass. I have a whole video about this as well. So if you want to watch it, it's somewhere in the screen here. You can watch it. I use hybrid reverb as an impulse response loader. So I can load impulse responses of cabinets, guitar cabinets in my session and have the cabinet that I want. And I'm using free cabinets, guys. Links in the description for the cabinets I use, again, using a Friedman Mono Vintage 30. It's a cool cabinet, all right? I browsed across all of these cabinets here and I chose this one. I like Vintage 30 speakers. I think they're some of the best. They're the standard, you know, they're like pretty common, but they're very good. So yeah, this is my cabinet simulator right here. So this is before and this is after. Again, the cabinet impulse response, for me, it just places the guitar in the real world. It takes it out of the DAW a little bit and puts it in a room coming out of a cabinet. I'm just trying to simulate the real world. I'm trying as best as I can to create my own little matrix here, right? My BLINK-182 matrix, and trying to stick all of the gear that they had inside Ableton here somehow, right? So that's all I did. Then, as I told you before, I recorded this guitar 3 times, one panned left, one pen right, one pen to the middle, just the root notes, right? So this is how that sounds. And that was it. And this is how it sounds at this point. Now the heavy lifting has to happen in a group. I grouped all of these guitars into this cleans group right here, and I'm gonna do some serious heavy lifting to get those guitars sounding like they sound in the What's My Age song. So click here. First step, EQ8. Those guitars, man, they don't have a lot of low end. So I cut a lot of low end out. I know it's weird, counterintuitive, maybe because those guitars are by themselves there. So you imagine they like, oh, they need that low end, right? But I checked the song with my ears. I watched it on a Spectrum as well. And those guitars do not have a lot of low end. So I cut a lot of low end and I cut a little bit of the highs because I actually needed them to be a little bit mellower, a little bit more dark. So this is before and after. You see, it just makes it more spunky and more middly, and it gets closer to the original track. Next step, compression. Clean guitars, always compressed. That is gonna bring the picking and the sustain all together. The sustain is gonna be longer and more delicious. The picking is gonna be more controlled. Always compress clean guitars. And I'm using the glue compressor here to glue all of these three guitars together as well, which is a good idea. You see, it's just barely controlling when I played it a little bit too hard. And it has kind of a not so fast, not so slow attack, not so fast, not so slow release, and 4:1 ratio. Pretty simple, right? Now, the key to this guitar sound is this plugin right here. Chorus and Sembo. Because these guitars, when I first hear them, I'm like, is that a flanger? What's that? That doesn't sound as extreme as a flanger, but they sound wide. They sound still a little bit phasey. What's like a flanger, but it's not as strong as a flanger? Chorus. So here we go. Chorus plugin. It messes around with the phase of the sound. So it sounds phasey, it sounds wider, and it gives that kind of sound. And because it's a chorus, it's very mellow, it's very subtle, but it makes all of the difference in this song because these guitars are pretty chorusy. As you can see here, the dry wet is to 33%, so it's not that hidden back there. And I had to play with the rates and the amounts to get the same vibe that they get in the original song. And I also put a little bit of warmth in there to make it more analog. I want everything in my song to be warmer. That's a good quality I like. So this is before and after. You see, it just spreads the guitars a little bit and make them move. It gives them a subtle movement that helps the melancholy of the song. It's pretty cool. I use chorus on a lot of things, vocals, bass, a lot of things, but it was essential for these guitars. And lastly, when I heard the freaking guitars from the original track, again, soloed, it's like, damn, these guitars, they sound kind of crunchy, but it's not like a crunch coming from the guitar amp. This crunch is coming from the console or from the tape, something like that. It's coming from after it was recorded. It's not coming from the original amp sound, you know? It was like, okay, so I'm not gonna distort these guitars in the amp level. I'm gonna distort these guitars in the last stage, very last stage, as if they were hitting tape or a console. And that's what this pedal plugin is doing here. You see, the gain is at 0, but as I said before, this pedal still adds a little bit of overdrive, even when it's at 0. So this is before, and this is after. It's weird because you think, I'd rather have the clean guitars. But when you listen to the original track, it has that little crunch that you just heard there. And it helps with the chorus as well. You can hear the chorus going through the pedal as well, which makes me believe in the original track, this is crunch from the console or from the tape, something like that. And I believe that I got pretty close to the original sound with these plugins here. See, it wasn't a lot of plugins. It was all right, wasn't it? A lot of stages, a lot of investigation and analysis, but we got there eventually. Now on to the dirty guitars. This was the hardest part for me because I'm gonna admit it right now. The amp sim enabled on live is not great for heavy tones. Not great. It's just not its specialty. It's fine for crunchy and clean tones, but it's not great for the distorted tones. So I really had to pull some big moves in there. But I started again recording my guitars line in, no processing, directly to my interface. One to the left, one to the right. That's just how pop punk works, right? One guitar to the left, one to the right, wide guitars, most of the times in pop punk. Anyway, so recorded the guitars twice, the exact same thing as you can see here, exact same thing on 2 tracks, recorded twice. 2 different takes, remember? Not the same take copied and pasted. 2 takes that recorded separately. 1 pen left, 1 pen right. This is how it sounded coming directly off my interface. Then the first step was to find an amp that I liked, and the best one that I could find is this Heavy. From the faceplate here, you would think that they are simulating a Mesa amp, which is good because Tom DeLonge uses Mesa amps for distorted tones. Doesn't quite sound like one, but it was the closest thing we had. So that's the one that I used, and this is how it sounded. Again, horrible, but remember, you have to use the cabinet trick here with hybrid reverb to make it sound like it's coming out of an actual guitar amp cabinet. Again, different cabinet. Remember all the links in the description below for the cabinets. They're all free. Different cabinet, but it makes all the difference to make this guitar come out of a cabinet. Listen to it. Now that sounds like a real guitar in the real world. And I like to distort even more. Instead of just boosting the distortion all the way up here on my amp, I like to distort a little bit more with a pedal, because that's what usually I did in the real world. I had an overdrive pedal going into an amp, and both were distorting a little bit, like compounding distortion is what I liked to do. And I did this same thing here, and it got me closer to the sound of the track. See, it just makes it more aggressive, more fizzy, a little bit more high-endy, but not annoyingly high-endy. Same processing for both guitar tracks right here. One panned left, I panned it 42 left arbitrarily. I thought it sounded closer to the original track being 42 left, 42 right, but I have no idea how they did it in the original track, because consoles actually influence how your panning sounds, even though if you pan hard left, hard right, hard left and hard right sounds different in different consoles. Then the hard processing comes here to make those guitars sound like Tom DeLonge guitars, man. Group them together, add a EQ, make them a little bit more high-endy, because the guitars in these tracks is actually really high-endy. So let's just mute everything here and go bit by bit. Original sound right here. Needed more high-end to cut through that mix, really. Listening to it soloed like this makes it like, are you crazy? It's already so fizzy. What? But I needed it to make it like the real song and to make it cut through the mix as well. It's very important that I didn't just use like a high shelf. I chose the high mid frequency that I needed here. In this case was 2.6, 2.7, something like that. I boosted that, and I took some of these nasally sounds here in the mids. It helped a lot. Now I'm using the famous OTT preset. Again, remember presets in Ableton Live? They're hidden under little arrows. So if you go to Dynamics, Multiband Dynamics, you have the famous OTT preset here, and is the most used preset in Ableton Live by all the electronic music producers. It just gives hype to your sound, and for these guitars I needed hype. I don't mess around with this preset, you know, this preset is legendary. I just mess around with the mix amounts, because if you leave it all the way up like this, listen to this, it's too much hype. It's just too much hype. Maybe it works for electronic music, but for this it's too much. I left it at 10% to just get a little bit of hype there in the background, just going like, woohoo, I'm here. And this is the before and after. You can really hear that hype coming in. It's crazy because it's 10% mixed in, but it's there. Next step, saturator. Again, because I wanted to simulate that step where the guitars get not only distorted by the amp, but they get distorted by the console and the tape. Like they get saturated, right? So that's just a touch of saturation here. Dry wet, you see 24% and a little bit of saturation. Whoa, this is actually more aggressive than I remember, but I'm sure that it sounds good in the mix. So lastly, again, stacking plugins, stacking EQs always, because I didn't want to mess around with this EQ. I thought it was good. Put a new one in there, cut a lot of the low end that was coming in probably from these stages here. Some low end was added. So I cut the low end again, boosted the highs again, and this is before and after. These are some extreme moves, but listen to these guitars in the mix. I'm gonna bypass all of the processing now. Can't even hear them. I'm gonna even put the volume up a little bit. Even when you put the volume up, they don't cut through the mix, and you're gonna end up screwing up your mix because you're making these guitars super loud and you're boosting a bunch of things that you don't need. All you needed was to EQ it right and process it right, and they would cut through at a lower volume. then when I heard the song, I noticed that the last chorus sounded like they had more guitars stacked together. The last chorus just sounded bigger. And it makes sense because the last chorus always has to be bigger, right? So I recorded 2 more tracks of guitars, pan left, pan right. And what I did here, you can see in utility, if I go to automation mode, I leave them really quiet. So they're very much in the background for the whole track playing in the chorus. But in the last chorus, they really come up and they really make the last chorus much bigger. So let's hear it with and without those guitars. Nobody likes you when you're 23. You act like you're away from me. Nobody likes you when you're 23. Especially in the last section. Just listen to this with and without. These guitars also bring in more low end because the guitars in the end just sounded thicker. So I brought more low end. As you can see here, I did less processing on these ones and I didn't use OTT. I wanted these guitars to be the thick guitars, not the hype guitars, right? So another good trick there, you can also stack the starter guitars if you need more and more from your guitars. Another cool trick, this guitar has a little palm muted section, right? The best thing to record palm muted guitars, if possible, is to record them separately from your main guitars. That way you can really dial in your palm muted tone separately from your normal dirty tone. So that way you can make sure it's attacky, it's crunchy, it's chuggy, you know? So you can see here, I did kind of the same processing as the other one, but I made it more focused on this high end here because the bass here is dominating the low end. It was really cool to have this track separately from my other track to process it completely differently. And this is how the palm muted guitars sound in the mix. And later on the drive home, when I said I was the cops in your husband. See, not a lot of low end in there. They needed to be chuggy, but not overwhelm the low end. And a lot of times when you chug guitars, a lot of low end comes through. So I cut it off. It's gone. And lastly, the other clean guitars, the clean guitars from the bridge. So these ones, I used the same process here for the amp and cabinet as my intro guitars. All that I did was do a different processing here in the group. You see, they're grouped left and right, just like all of my guitars left and right. But I had to be more extreme with the high end because in the section of the song, there's more stuff playing. They're not playing on their own. So I had to boost the high end for them to cut through more and gain more of a center stage in this section of the song. Let's just hear this stage by stage. See, they're quite buried there. And if I turn this on, they come through. Then compression, you know, as I said, the same compression from the other guitars. Always compressor clean guitars, control them a little bit. Now here, this section, I listened to it and I was like, now this is sounding like a flanger. And indeed, it is a flanger. So I used the phaser flanger plugin in flanger mode. Play with the rate and the amount and the feedback again for this. I'm gonna play around with them just a bit so you can hear what they actually do. So the rate is the speed of your flanger, right? Amount is the amount of flanging that you want. And feedback feeds the flanger back into the flanger, which makes it even more flangy, if you know what I'm saying. You really gotta go tasteful with this one because it can get annoying. And again, warmth, because I love warmth. The trick with flangers is sometimes you think, oh, did they automate the flanger to make it kind of grow during the section? They might have, but I found out that flanger is very, very sensitive to the way you play the track. So what I did here, you can even see in the wave, I play softly in the beginning and I grow gradually in volume towards the end. And that way the flanger also grows in volume towards the end and it sounds really cool. Again, then to make more spacey, I used Echo. Echo is a really cool delay plugin in Ableton Live, and I just used the standard preset. I just dragged it in, mixed it in, put some reverb in there to make it more spaced out, put some modulation into that reverb and echo as well. That was it. Dry wet mix to 23%, and the pedal trick again to add that crunch, that tape crunch to the end. And these guitars are being sent to my Vox reverb, actually, the reverb that's meant for my voice. Sending those guitars just because they needed to sound big in this section, and the Vox reverb was big and nice, and I sent it to the Vox reverb, and there you go. Let's hear this whole section and really listen to the flanger growing, the space coming in, all of the good things. There you go. And that's all my guitars. How about that? We did it. The clean guitar sound, the iconic clean guitar sound from What's Mage again. Now you know how to do it in Ableton using Ableton plugins. At home, man. You can do this at home. This is crazy. I hope you like this video. Next video, we're gonna have a little short one, and it's gonna be about the keyboards in this track. It has one little keyboard, this track. Again, thank you to Rick Beato, because I listened to that keyboard when he soloed it in his video. So next video is gonna be a short one about the keyboard. So make sure you subscribe to my channel so you get all of the videos in the series in your subscription box. And please press all the other buttons as well that help me in this world. And I see you all next time. Bye. That's about the time she walked away from me. Nobody likes you when you're 23.